hoping that this will last under 1 hour. But then before I get on, I wanted to make a brief reference to what we learned yesterday. So essentially, we're looking at an EPR business change program yesterday, and we saw how we essentially walked through that project, through the analysis phase, through the design phase, through the implementation phase until we went live, how we planned the cut over, and how we eventually went live with that particular service. Now, today I wanted us to look into a typical retail case study. So I'm going to be explaining the case study briefly as we proceed. But in the meantime, just to mention that there are going to be two work streams, and I'm going to explain each of the work streams as we progress. So hopefully we'll be able to understand the similarities and the slight discrepancies between the two sorts of the project. As mentioned earlier, this case study is going to be around manufacturing and retail. So just a very quick glance through the agenda for tonight. So we're going to start with the context of the project. So I'm going to be laying a foundation as to what the project that we're going to be dealing with tonight is all about. And then I'm equally going to give a high-level overview of the different work streams. So I mentioned that there are going to be two work streams that we're going to be dealing with concurrently. I'm hoping that in the next couple of minutes, that will make more sense to you. And one of those work streams will be the ERP work stream. So we're going to start with the ERP work stream, and then we're going to see how we're going to, we're going to follow like all the different steps that we have here, like finalizing the scope, business blueprint, sign off, configuration, unit testing, all the way through until we've covered most of this. So when we get to the MVA work stream, which is the second work stream, so the first work stream is the enterprise resource planning work stream, and the second work stream will be the multi-vendor application work stream. So when we get here, we're going to deal with this, and then we continue from here, wherein the activities that come from here all the way to end applies to both of them. So I'm hoping that over time, it will make sense to you. So let's look at the context, the overall context of the project. So this is relating to a manufacturing company or a manufacturing organization, whichever is appropriate. So, and let's think of it. What sort of activities would a manufacturer do? So a manufacturer would obviously buy raw materials to be able to produce whatever it is they're manufacturing. A manufacturing organization will be able to do their master planning schedule as well as their master requirement planning. So essentially, this refers to the fact that a manufacturing organization would want to consider the extent. So let's look at a scenario where someone places an order with that manufacturer, and the manufacturer essentially has a certain number of goods or certain number of raw materials, but those raw materials are not enough to be able to develop or manufacture the products which someone has now placed an order for. So essentially, they'll have to check what they've got, and they'll also have to then go ahead to order what is required, and they'll have to create a schedule upon which that manufacturing will be completed, and then they can ship it out to the buyer and all of that. So all of these activities which I've mentioned now are supported by an enterprise resource planning software. So this organization currently has an Automan ERP. So the brand, or the type of the ERP that they have at the moment is known as Automan. And this Automan helps them to manage all of these things which I've mentioned and more. So, for example, for them to even start that manufacturing, they'll need to put in a work order. And that ERP helps them to create that work order. At the moment, they have very limited digital activities when it comes to e-sales. So even though they have a website, they've not really explored or they've not really maximized the potentials of that website. They've not maximized the potentials that they have as a big company towards selling things in retail. So at the moment, they're just selling on wholesale. And selling on wholesale means usually that a customer will have to call them on the phone and they take an order on the phone, they'll raise a quotation and then they'll raise an invoice and then the customer pays and then they'll check whether they have enough materials and the manufacturer and then they'll ship to the customer. And that's the typical business model at the moment, right? And in between these, the ERP is able to do some activities whilst they have to, unfortunately rely on Excel to manage some of the other activities. Okay, so there's quite a lot of analog sales and tracking processes at the moment. However, in the future state, they are looking to move away from the Ottoman ERP and move to a Dash ERP, which is a much more robust and recent technology. They're also looking to enhance their e-sales application, the overall customer journey, the overall experience. They are looking to expand or enhance that. They're also looking to acquire multi-platform integration, right? So I'm going to try my best to explain that in a way that hopefully makes a bit of sense to you. But, more, just looking at it from the faces of it, this ERP, which they're hoping to acquire now, will now be integrated with their e-commerce, channels, and it will also be, integrated with another postal management software. And I'll explain the use case as time goes on. But there's a sequence that leads us to understanding that use case in the first place, right? So moving forward, there also has to be a workflow automation within the postal management software. So I'll explain this as well in a moment, and as well as having dynamic reporting. So I'm just going to minimize my screen and try to find systems which will enable me to fully demonstrate what it is that I'm trying to explain. So if you bear with me one moment, I will bring up the screens and hopefully we can take it from there. So I might need to refresh and log in again. So this is the current Ottoman ERP. So this is the current enterprise resource planning software which they are using. And obviously, I'm not going to go through everything, but I'm just going to lay a foundation, if that makes sense. So for things like quotation, as I mentioned, it's pretty much very manual. There's a call from a customer. They agree to issue a quotation. They raise that quotation within the system. The system emails that invoice to that customer. The customer pays, and once the customer has paid, the customer then comes back, maybe via email or via telephone call. And at that time, essentially, a receipt or an invoice will be given. When it's time to actually ship out the product, they will have to, go ahead to book the direct delivery and so on and so forth. The host of several other functionalities, including, checking customer payments as well as creating credit notes and so on and so forth. There is also a module for purchases, which allows them to go ahead to, procure or purchase raw materials and so on and so forth. If they're required to do some manufacturing, they equally have a module that would enable them to put in a work order. Okay, so work order simply means we need to, give in an order to the factory to produce 1,000 mattresses or 1,000 phone cases, etc. So, this is just like a brief overview of what they are currently doing at this moment. Now, in the future state, what they are hoping to achieve essentially is to have a much more robust e-commerce, channel where they can not only sell in it's no longer going to be a case of selling in wholesale. They're also now looking to start selling in retail, right? But for us to have this kind of, robust future state, a lot more conversation needs to happen. There needs to be an existing or perhaps a developed integration between these two systems, because technologies such as this would normally have like a master data or a single source of truth for things like the inventory. So for example, if an item is sold here, the ERP ought to know, or the ERP should be notified. The ERP should equally manage the inventory, meaning that once an item drops below maybe 1,000 or 500, it will automatically trigger a work order. That work order will have to be approved, it has to be produced, and then it has to be restocked, and so on and so forth. Now, but what the organization is equally now hoping to do is to also be very much in charge of the postal, the logistics, if that makes sense. So you purchase from the company, they send out that particular item, and that particular stuff is managed. The postage of that item is managed by their own courier organization or by their own courier company, wherein they are able to track your item, or you're able to track your item, but they retain visibility of that item until it gets to the owner. So this is the high level of what the organization is hoping to achieve in the future state. Unfortunately, at the moment, it does not have that kind of a robust network, or it doesn't have that kind of a robust structure. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once more, and we can continue from where we were. So let me just continue. Please, can someone confirm if you can see my screen? Please, if someone can confirm if you can see my new screen, the slides which I'm sharing.
Yes, Chief, can see it.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now, this is essentially what it is, what we're hoping to achieve. And by so doing, let me equally mention or perhaps describe the work streams. Again, or rather, recount on the work stream. So, for us to be able to achieve this, essentially, it cannot be done by one business analyst. Because what normally happens is that one business analyst will essentially manage the ERP work stream, and one business analyst will manage the digital vendor application enhancement. Those are two different work streams. And believe you me, it is, big enough. The outcome of the ERP migration is that we're going to retire the Automan, and we're going to go ahead to start using the Dash ERP. The outcome of the vendor application enhancement will be that we are going to elicit requirements from the stakeholders within that organization as to how they really, as to the objectives. And based on those objectives, we are going to be able to carry out a functional decomposition of requirements. And based off of that, we're then able to develop several user stories that will help us to enhance that system. Now, at the end of the day, we are going to be delivering a full service that essentially comprises of a new ERP system, which is now integrated with a multi-vendor e-commerce store, which is also integrated with the postal management software. Okay, and by virtue of that, how then would you essentially go ahead to pursue this as the business analyst? So, as mentioned yesterday, or perhaps a similarity between what we learned yesterday and what we are learning now is in the extent or in the side of as is analysis. So essentially what that means is that your first call as a business analyst will be towards doing an in-depth analysis of how things are within that organization. But think of the differences or the discrepancies between what we learned yesterday and what we are learning today. In the NHS one, which we looked into yesterday, they already decided to move into, to adopt an entirely different system. The scope of the project was to ensure a like-for-like replacement for the system which they already had. Now, moving forward, on this particular project, the goals, perhaps the project is a little bit different. Because what they're hoping to do in this one would be to retire an ERP and move on to, a new ERP. That looks very close to the one of yesterday. But by the side of that, we are now talking about very massive integrations. We are now talking about enhancing an already existing system. So that means there is definitely going to be some development. It's not going to be like the one of yesterday where we did not have any form of, requirement specification or any form of user stories and things of that nature. So after we've essentially done that gap analysis, we'll then proceed to do a fit gap analysis. So essentially, in doing a fit gap analysis, what it simply means is understanding the features that Ottoman ERP has that we are going to be carrying over to the future state, as well as identifying other needs or other features which the Ottoman does not have, but which we are going to be requiring in the future state. I hope that is clear enough. So the Ottoman has functionalities which we need in the current state, and as well there are functionalities which it does not have, which we're going to be needing in the future state. So the outcome of this fit gap analysis is going to be an outlined, set of gaps, which would include, as I've just explained. Now, at the moment when we have this fit gap analysis already, it is then time for us to go ahead to finalize the scope of this project. Because at the point when we're still starting, at the point when we're doing our analysis and our fit gap analysis and stuff, we had a perceived scope, and the perceived scope could be, scoped to ensuring that we have a like for like, as well as all the functionalities that we need to be able to support our e-commerce channel. So it can be as far as that. But then at the time when we finish our fit gap analysis, we'll then have a clearer understanding of what needs to be done as well as what does not need to be done. So that helps us to build the scope thereof. And then once we are done with that, we'll then have to create what is known as a business blueprint document. Now, normally in creating a blueprint document, this is not typically the role of, a business analyst might contribute to it. If your organization has a functional analyst, then they may be in the position to essentially do that do that documentation for yourself. But in any case, the blueprint document contains everything, mentioning the gaps which have been identified, mentioning the components or the high level solutions which are going to be offered in response to those gaps to the organization, and so on and so forth. So it's a typical document that has that capability of communicating that kind of knowledge. And then that piece of document essentially is now handed over to a distributed team of stakeholders who are responsible for making acceptance changes or approving requests for that organization. It would normally be within the lines of the project sponsor and some of the other responsible officers who are sitting within that hierarchy. So at the point when this the blueprint is signed off, we can then proceed with the configuration of that particular system. So again, configuration is not quite the role of a business analyst. Otherwise, you are a business analyst who is very much vast in the area of using ERPs, enterprise resource planning software. So you would see some BAs who are experts with SAP. You'll see some BAs who are experts with Dynamics. So under such circumstances, then you'll find that such BAs are equally able to, create configurations. So you have to configure the system to meet the standard and the sequence described within the blueprint document. So to put this to even, a more easily conceivable context, when you did your gap analysis, you found out that, okay, you've got 4 things working for you. We've identified under 6 things. These 6 things will need to do 7 configurations to work for them. We need to do 1 custom configuration, and we need to do, some other kind of enhancement within the system to be able to achieve this. You articulate all of that within that blueprint document. You show it to them, and now it's time to do your configuration. That configuration essentially must meet what you have produced or what you have imputed into that blueprint document, because immediately after the configuration, then we will begin to conduct unit testing. Now, I've seen, we typically, some organizations typically have like testers who do like lots and lots of this unit testing. In so many cases, uh, the involvement of a business analyst during unit testing can be very, very important because it can serve as an opportunity to identify a challenge early enough and resolve that challenge before things get out of place. So you might have yourself as the business analyst being the point of contact during this unit testing. So unit testing essentially, defines the fact that, okay, let's say we've identified one gap, and as a solution to that gap, which is produced within the blueprint, uh, we now do a configuration which will resolve that particular gap. So since the business analyst did the gap analysis, for example, or since the maybe the functional consultant, for example, did that particular fit gap analysis, it becomes relevant that the person who did that who did the gap analysis, should then be the one who essentially does that test, just to make sure that the agreed perception is what they have configured. Because believe you me, in a real life, in practicality, there are circumstances that you engage with developers, you engage with some of the IT teams, and you explain something, and they say, yes, I understand, until they build that stuff. And then you understand that, the concept of Doc Rabbit really is real in business analysis. So under the, with regards to conducting the unit testing, if you're in that position, then it's usually my recommendation. I don't pass on it in my own personal capacity. I would like to, play a very significant role in that. Then moving forward, our IT guys would then start loading the data in preparation for, the upcoming UAT. So remember that at the time when all these configurations are being done on the system, it's a plain system. So we come back again to the concept which we described yesterday, the concept of commercial off-the-shelf solutions, which is really, 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 really big in the UK as well as the whole world today. Right? And the deployment of such technologies tend to be slightly different from the way we sort of do deployments of other, kind of solutions, or where we're actually doing like an internal building of a functionality or a system. So we'll understand that. Please bear in mind that we've not really said anything yet about enhancing the other system. It's part of the scope of this conversation that we're having today, but we've not said anything about it, and I'm coming to it in a minute. So at the point when we are concluding our, unit testing, the guys over there, obviously, because the system is still, empty, it's now time for them to sort of bring in some data into that system to enable us to be able to, execute some level of a user acceptance, testing. And also quite very similar to what we learned yesterday, in planning and perhaps executing that user acceptance testing, the business analyst becomes very much involved in developing a test script. Now, I mean, these are essentially skills that are very important, to any BA, being able to document that as well as go through that. I wish we had more time. I'll be more than happy to show you, a couple of samples. But on the bright side, it's really, really an easy stuff to achieve. So, hopefully that's something that wouldn't take much of your time. So you arrange a time and a venue, which is absolutely very important. Uh, Most cases, it may not really be down to you. You might have a test analyst or a lead tester within that organization who has that, the responsibility of sort of arranging those and meeting up with the stakeholders who will come in for the testing and all of that. Remember that your test script is like a blueprint. It's like, it's going to be written based on the scenarios of that place of work. Scenarios, for example, meaning like purchasing goods or placing an order for procurement, making sales, raising an invoice or raising a quotation invoice, converting an invoice, converting a quotation to an invoice, and so on and so forth. Right? So those are some of the things which you have to consider. And moving forward, on the day of the UAT as well, you'll have to be there in person. The execution of it is not different in action from what we sort of learned yesterday. It's a typical setting with people in there whom you will hand over your test script, and whom with that test script would essentially then go ahead to start, executing the test script based off what you've written within the scripts in themselves. Now, the very, very big, gain, if you will, or the very, very big milestone, which we're going to be celebrating at this point, will be a sign off of the UAT. But there's also something that I need to explain, because typical projects of this type tend to have more than one UAT cycle, right? So we may just have completed UAT cycle 1. Remember that we still have the other work stream. Both work streams are within the same program. So ideally, we're not going live with one without the other. So we've just been talking about one. We've just done UAT on one. So we're still going to do the UAT on the second one, and there's a very wonderful chance we could even do, a UAT cycle 3. In any case, let us then take just a few slides, maybe 2 to 3 slides, to look into the second work stream. And this second work stream essentially is anchored on enhancing the multi-vendor application capabilities. This is a high-level requirement. It's a business requirement. Within its own right, it is as complicated as it can be. You probably, as a BA, get requirements which are within this level. So it then becomes your responsibility to dig deeper and find out, all the, specify it essentially, being able to inherit a high-level requirement, and then be able to carry out a functional decomposition to make it as detailed as possible. So we also need to integrate the multi-vendor application with the enterprise resource planning system. With the enterprise resource planning system, as well as the postal management software. So under this kind of situation, we will then have to initiate a discovery. And as the name implies, discovery essentially is you trying to understand what you don't understand. So this is what you have. These are high-level information. If that, it's not as detailed. Yeah, enhancing the MVA. Okay, that's fine. But what are we enhancing? Which functionalities are we enhancing? Which side of the MVA are we enhancing? Okay, we need to integrate the MVA with the ERP and the PMS. That's fine. But, what is the expected result? Right? So if you're integrating two systems, obviously there's got to be something you're hoping to get out of it. So it is during this, times like this that we then start thinking about the best means of our approach, whether we're going to have to start running workshops or whether we're going to just have to start, talking to people. Depending upon the configuration of that organization, you might just have, you might be in a position where you have a meeting with 3 or 4 people. I wish I had the opportunity to replay some kind of those videos with you, but it's typically something that looks like this. You start up with the meeting, and then you sort of present, the overall topic, and, tell them you probably, move from one to the other if that is feasible. And then that you're essentially seeking to understand the level of enhancements that they want within the multi-vendor application. And then you begin to hear things like, well, because we are looking to go global now, there are standards that we need to meet. And those standards will equally ensure, or, the standards demand that we have to carry out a KYC on customers who are seeking to join our multi-vendor application. So we're going to be needing we're going to be needing a KYC application, a KYC capability within the sign-up form of the website. And secondly, even the form in itself is just a one-pager. There are several other types of information, for example, business information, address information, and so on and so forth, which we're going to be needing from these people. Now, another stakeholder is now telling you once again that, because people are going to be buying, we need to have we need to have a system that is going to be managing, a dispute resolution system or a dispute resolution process. then that creates another conversation. So you start having like several meetings to define how that dispute resolution is going to work. That maybe a customer raises a dispute, someone receives it, and within 24 hours, if it's not resolved in 24 hours, it can be escalated to admin and so on and so forth. And then we start talking about the integration, with this other ERP as well as the PMS. And then we are now getting the idea from that conversation that when an item is sold within the website, within the e-commerce application, the ERP should get a notification so that the inventory can be adjusted. So if the inventory had 200 items and we've just sold one, the API call should happen between the multi-vendor application, that's the e-com website, should make an API call to the to the ERP, telling the ERP that I've just sold one item, and that item which I've sold is item 01105, so that the ERP would then adjust that item by one. At the same time, we also need the ERP, we also need the e-commerce application to make another API call to the postal management software. Now, once it makes that call to the postal management software, the postal management software is now required to do a level of automation to generate a shipping label by itself and send that shipping label to the warehouse so that the guys at the warehouse can print out that particular set of activities, that particular shipping label, nicely put it on the box and get it ready to be posted. So can you see that gradually we are now getting somewhere with this kind of requirement? So it came to us as a high level. However, through sheer conversation, and sometimes I think that the word workshops and engaging with people is overrated because it has the tendency of scaring people off. But really, this is what it is. You get into that kind of conversation with very jovial people sometimes, it even becomes fun before you know what's going on. But in any case, we are just coming to the point where we are now sort of, concluding our discoveries, because what we've just done now is the discovery. It's a discovery into the problems, into the challenges, into the needs of that organization. And now moving away or coming out of that discovery in itself, it is now time for us to consider the possibility of involving one other professional. Now, that professional is known as a solutions architect. Now, from a technical perspective, taking data from one system, moving it to another system, making another API call to another system, all these data are going to be flying around, and essentially, where is going to be the location, to store the data. Or is it even vaguely possible for those API calls to be made, but still the data will be, kept within its source? And this idea, which I've just recounted to you now, is it even technically possible? Right? So the solutions architect will come in and get the idea, and the solutions architect is the one that actually sort of, designs that, the technicality of the possibility in terms of technical aspect of what we are talking about. So you can see them start talking about, the source of the data, how we're going to be managing the databases, essentially whether we're even going to use containerization or perhaps deploying of microservices in terms of the infrastructure. It comes up with all this very, very technical stuff. It's just like looking, what the BAs do most of the times would probably be to maybe define a requirements of how the brake will work. That when you apply the brakes, the vehicle should come to a stop, and it should come to a stop within 3 seconds. So non-functional requirement, functional requirement, the car should stop. Non-functional, it should stop within 3 seconds, and so on and so. But then the mechanics or the engineers, in this case the solutions architect, will be the one who design what goes in terms of that. When you apply the brakes, then it will release a bit of brake fluid, and then the calipers would contract, or perhaps the brake parts will come together. So I'm just hoping that you understand a little bit of what I'm trying to explain here in terms of the discrepancy between what we do and what this guy does. So there are ways more technical than you and I. they can see underneath in terms of what happens behind stage, of how, or the architecture that is going to make this to work in the first place. Now, moving on from there, we then move on to start gathering or perhaps eliciting further requirements. Now, in terms of eliciting these further requirements, of course, we've already set a pace as to how this is going to work. We know essentially what we are hoping to achieve. We know that at the end of the day, at a high level, that we want the exchange of data from system 1 to system 2 to system 3 and so on and so forth. And we now know that with regards to the multi-vendor application, that we need to enhance that we need to enhance the form. So usually when we're having this conversation, it's more around understanding the objectives. What we are now trying to do at this time essentially is to understand what that form should look like. So you said that there are legal requirements as to the kind of information that you ought to collect. So now I need to know the specific information that you need to collect, right? And with regards to this KYC, we now need to start describing discussing the behavior of this KYC mechanism. So is it going to be where you ask the customer to take a picture, and then when they take the picture, they will also take their selfie, or maybe take a picture of their selfie and then take a picture of their ID card, and the system will do the validation? Or, we begin to talk about specifics. We also mentioned about dispute resolution. We begin to think about the functionalities that will be in place. We begin to articulate the use case associated to it. Use case meaning that someone who purchased from that website can decide to say, I don't want this anymore. So that means we need to have, the function or the feature within the system for that person to be able to raise a dispute. And we also need to, gradually plan the customer journey so that finding that button would not necessarily be almost impossible or hidden somewhere that cannot be found. And then when the person clicks on that button, then what next? So that means, well, the system has to give the person the opportunity to write out their anger or why they want to raise the dispute. That's fine. So when they do it and submit it, then what next? Well, the standard operating procedure for that is that it has to come to sales first. If sales is not able to resolve it within 3 days, then it has to be escalated to admin. So that means we now need to build or include, a receptor within the dashboard, which is going to be used by the salespeople. And that raises another question. So in terms of this, are we going to be using maybe like a service management, a help desk, service management system, or are we going to be looking to auto assign cases to, some of these people, to some of the salespeople? So those are questions which need to be answered. And those are, the kind of things that we're now talking about when we're talking about requirement gathering or requirement elicitation. We need that level of information. And what we do with those kind of information, we analyze them, right? It's you may not necessarily overgrow it, that when you sit down with stakeholders, you might find it to be the case that you spend time and you think you've exhausted all the things, or maybe you've asked all the questions, but unfortunately it turns out that you've not really asked all the questions. Or you come back, like one of those situations where you're talking with someone and the stakeholder says, well, we are going to supersede this order, or we need the system to be able to supersede an order, and you just flow along with it. And then when you come back, you start asking yourself, what really does he mean by supersede an order? Right? Or does the requirement provided even make sense at all? So essentially, you go through those, maybe on your cup of coffee, maybe just on your screen. It's not a biggie per se, but this is where your analytical thinking comes into play. You probably cannot learn this as a gift from God. Most people have it as, a natural tendency. Now, as our requirements is taking shape, we obviously need to have some level of documentation. So I wouldn't personally take a requirement from, a stakeholder without proper analysis and stuff, then start writing user stories. As a matter of fact, even before I start writing user stories, I normally just create like an Excel document where I capture like, each of those documents and put them more like based on their functionality or their capability in itself. System shall do this, system shall do that, system shall notify seller once a dispute has been raised, and so on and so forth. So at the point when I just, either put that on a Word format or perhaps on an Excel format, it is now time for me to approach the stakeholders with whom we reached that agreement or with whom or who provided or produced those requirements. They are usually people of power, to be honest. But there's usually a meeting which would normally have both lower staff, where lower staff essentially have provided requirements, as well as the high level staff, maybe like your project sponsor and so on and so forth. And these set of requirements will have to be validated. So validation essentially meaning a sign off. Okay. Remember that at this point, I just have my requirements, nothing too bad, nothing too, at this point, it's still casual, casual looking. I can even have like write like bullet points. I can even send it via email to say, thank you, Mr. Sean. I've had time to go through the requirements which you've provided for me. I am therefore sending this back to see whether I've articulated, your mindset or your requirements appropriately. Please find the requirements provided as follows. Number one, you have indicated that system should do this, do that. You have, number two, you have requested that for this to happen, so you can list it out like that, and you can have 7, 8, 9, 12, 20 of them, and so on and so forth. And essentially at the point when those sets of requirements are validated, which means they're signed off, remember to keep obviously proof that those have been signed off. And now it is time for us to start working with the UI guys, right? Because and I'm remember that the context that we're talking about the multi-vendor application now. We're talking about that enhancement. Okay. And for us to enhance that form, obviously there needs to be a UI. And for us to also create and so actualize the dispute management process which we discussed, there needs to be UI and pages and all of that. So we need to bring that to life. And prototyping essentially can save you from a whole lot of problems. It's definitely 100%. There's no way we're going to build it without prototyping. It's just that we are, leading up, if that makes sense, with the mock-ups. I personally would like the mock-ups to be built outside the sprint, because once it gets as part of the sprint, it becomes a big problem. If there's a change or something that needs to be done, maybe we have to start waiting for the next release and all of that. So it doesn't make sense. Personally, I would like to, have those prototypes even before I start documenting my user stories. So that, in some cases, what, I can write my user stories and then I can just take a screenshot of that particular mock-up and attach it to Jira. At the point when we are planning, for the sprint and stuff, it becomes very easy for anyone who is reading it to understand. So at this point, you want to engage with your UI team to develop the mock-ups, which are going to essentially, represent what, the requirements which have been validated. And once again, it's wise to take that mock-up and engage with those stakeholders who approve the other one. So it's once more again, go back to them and say, look, we've come up with a mock-up of how we think this is going to look, and we would like to show you this to get your feedback. So sometimes they might ask you, no, don't do this. Can you just tweak it a little bit, and so on and so forth. Now, that little comment can save a lot from you, because I've been called into a project where actually they'd already gone live with that system, with that solution. But then the users, the business users, said they couldn't use it because they didn't like the overview. They wanted it to appear like in a line format or something of that nature. I can't remember what they called it, but it's just the dashboard not appearing in the way they wanted it to appear. A very slight something, but then, to amend the UI at that stage wasn't as easy as it would have been in the beginning. So moving on from here is now when I start to do my functional specification, specifically writing my user stories and acceptance criteria. So this is where you begin to define those functionalities and put them into the into the backlog. And series of conversations obviously will come, because if there is a product owner, this is now time when conversations will have to be made as to which MVP has to go first or which epics will have to be put in first. There has to be a plan of what we want to achieve progressively. So we might decide to say, you know what, let us follow up with the MVP to rebuild or rebrand the customer application, the form application. So we're going to then put all our resources into achieving that. And that might take us like 2 to 3 sprints. So all those kind of conversations will come in. We'll do our sprint planning and all other scrum activities, and essentially we start the production, and hopefully after a couple of sprints we'll then be able to achieve one MVP, right? So essentially, I'm hoping that you probably know what I mean by an MVP, but a minimum viable product being like a small. So in this case, we can say, you know what, let us pick out that form. So let's build, like let's build like a 2-page form that contains all this information that's been passed on to us by the stakeholders, as well as fit it with this KYC functionality, and let's deploy it and see how it works, and then we can continue improving on that functionality, the sign-off functionality, and so on and so forth. So we can do that for 2 to 3 sprints, and then we deploy that particular solution. And we just carry on doing that until we've sort of achieved all that we need, all that has been provided to us, right? And also remember that we had that conversation around, bear with me one moment. Okay, so also remember that we had that conversation around automation, right? So now the item has been sold within the multi-vendor application. The multi-vendor application goes ahead to make an API call to the ERP and says, Mr. ERP, I need you to do me a favor. I've just sold an item. Can you adjust? That's one API call. And the second API call is made to the postal management software. And the postal management software, actually, let me just see if I'm able to access that. Right, okay. If I'm able, so this is essentially what it looks like. And at this moment, it's essentially, very, very manual. So looking to create a shipment, you'll have to fill out everything manually. Unfortunately, the system seems to be slower than every other system tonight. Oh, thank God it's opened. So, I mean, if I wanted to ship an item now, I'm just going to go ahead to, start typing the name of whoever I want to send the product to, if I find the person. If I don't find anyone, then, well, if I find the person, then the system will obviously generate their address for me. But if it's a new person, then I'll have to click on here to fill out those details manually. So can you imagine that this, site is selling 6,000 items a day, which will be posted. And now you're expecting human beings to create this 6,000 times, the name of and details of sender, the name and details of buyer, all this other shipping information, all the package information, all the rates and taxes and so on and so forth to be able to generate, a shipping label. Yeah. So that is going to be too much, wouldn't it? It's not feasible. 6,000 sales per day, and human beings, how many people are you going to hire to do this? And what about the risk of risk associated with mistakes and stuff? So it's not feasible, right? So it is on this basis that those stakeholders are now also asking for automation. Actually, what we need or what we want as an organization is that once that item has been sold within the multi-vendor application, we also want this postal management software to automatically, that's automation. Once it receives that API call, it jumps into action and it will fill out, it will take all the sender information, receiver information, product details, package details, everything. It will take those information from the multi-vendor application and use that information to automatically generate a shipping manifest. And we're talking about this, happening in seconds. And then once it's generated, that it needs to make that information visible to the warehouse. So that, piece of information as well you would need to follow it up and generate requirements, write those requirements as user stories, as well as also write integration requirements, which will also go through the sprint. Integration requirements essentially specifying, what kind of information is going to be pulled from one system to another system, or what needs to be in place, the criteria that needs to be met, what is going to be the trigger, what is going to be the post conditions and all of that. And essentially ensure that all of those are written and responsible for development or perhaps upcoming development. So at the time when all the relevant, the developments, including the APIs, have been built, and API essentially, in case anyone listening to this doesn't know, is, it's just the ability for two systems to interconnect, interrelate with each other. So it's a code that links two systems, right? So we're talking about the multi-vendor application making an API call to the MVA. Simply means that a code is put in between them that makes it possible for data to automatically flow from the multi-vendor application to the ERP and also to the postal management software. Okay, so at the point when we've sort of gone through several sprints and we now have this and we're now getting very, very close to the end of the project and stuff, now it is time for us to start considering what we call integration testing. And this time again, we'll then also be talking about UAT too. Now, remember that I mentioned to you before, whilst we're talking about the ERP, I mentioned to you that there is a possibility that we're going to be having more than one cycle of UAT. And I explained the reason as being that, look, we're not just working on one thing. So we're not going to have just a UAT for the ERP. We're also going to have a UAT for, the MVA, the PMS, and so on and so forth, or perhaps the integration. So what's going to happen is that we're going to run an integration testing. So integration testing is essentially where we are going to integrate all the systems that we want to integrate. And after we've integrated those systems, we'll just maybe like execute one action, maybe execute one sale, and then see whether all of those things which we anticipate will happen. So we make one sale and then we see whether the inventory is adjusted within the what's it called, within the ERP, and also see whether the PMS is able to generate a shipping label, right? So we do that. And that's known as integration testing. Just test it to see whether we're going to be getting any error, and then also test it, from a practical perspective. Now, something else become very important for this to happen. And that thing is something which is known as data mapping, right? And a business analyst might as well do this. A business analyst can do it. Now, if you're a business analyst who understands or who is capable of using SQL to query, database systems, then you can actually just do it. You can query the database system and identify which tables belong to what. If not, most of the systems will have something known as a data dictionary. So with that data dictionary, you would essentially be able to identify data tables. Now, again, please pardon me. I think there are some really, really, advanced people, maybe people who have had this kind of knowledge, who are part of this meeting. But, for the sake of everyone else, just give me 1 minute to try and, elaborate just a little bit. So in doing this data mapping, and let me just find a random product, right? So I'll just find like a random product. I'll open that random product. So within this random product, let's say, for example, this product has now been sold, right? So when you look at the postal management software, there are a certain set of information that this system requires as a minimum to be able to generate that code, to be able to generate the postal label. It requires the name of the sender, the address, the name of the buyer, the address. It requires the delivery time. It requires all this information, the product description, the dimensions, and so on and so forth. But this information will need to come from somewhere. So data mapping in this context is now where we bring out our Excel template for data mapping and we say that this is the title of the item which has been sold. So we want the data which is coming from here to be pointed towards the package description of the PMS. So it's almost like where you say data from here should be pointed to here. Data from A should be pointed to C. Data from Y should be pointed to Q, and so on and so forth. It's a template, and that's all you're going to be doing. I'm not really sure whether I have to go beyond this. Essentially, in data mapping, you also start looking at data tables. So just the same way you would have Excel in database technology, essentially you have the tabs or the tables which you have in Excel. Those would sort of refer to like or the tabs you have in Excel, those would essentially refer to tables within database structures. So you can have a table that holds, for example, customer demographic information. You can have another table that holds financial information, and so on and so forth. So in data mapping, we'll probably be able to mention or identify the table as well as identify the field. And then I'm talking about the source, and also come to the target one and also identify the table and identify the field. And that way the chances of mistakes or error will be much limited. Okay, so we do our data mapping, and then at this point again, as we are getting very, very close to the deployment, then the API code will now be deployed to the test environment. And essentially, deploying it to that test environment will help us to be able to carry out the integration testing. And, once again, we might then start looking to go ahead with our UAT2. And at the point where we've tested those UAT, so the UAT2 can actually include now integration as well as those functionalities. So for example, sign up, we could run integration that now shows, that this item is also now decreasing within that sold items within the MVA is now decreasing the inventory within the ERP. So we can use UAT to do like a final UAT of both the integration and the new systems which we're deploying, and then we can move on to start considering the training activities, which is also part of the cutover activities. Right? So, and why is training always important? Because you're delivering a new service to that organization for which they have not used in the past. So you cannot just, take that and just drop it with them and expect them to do magic and understand it and then start using it just like that. Okay, so moving on from there, and also in preparation for the cutover planning, we start looking at risk assessment and migration. So essentially, risk assessment, we start looking at what are the possible or potential risks that we could encounter whilst trying to, go through this cutover. So, and what really are we even cutting over? Cutting over, we are essentially going to turn off Automan, and we're going to migrate to the new ERP, which is Dash, which has already been fully configured, already fully tested, and all of that. Yeah. And then we start looking at data cleansing and migration. So data cleansing and migration, essentially think of, because obviously that company for 10 years, for 15 years, for however number of years they've been using Automan, they've got data. The number of items they sold in 2020, in 2021, the refunds, the returns, all those data is saved within Automan. And we need to migrate those millions of data from Automan to the Dash ERP. So once again, if you're really, really advanced in this, you might play a role in data mapping, but normally the vendors, most vendors will have like their data team who would actually do this, data cleansing and data migration. It's a very big job. It's not an easy one, but it's worth knowing, even though it's not within your purview, or you will definitely not do the data migration. You might be asked to do some data mapping, depending on how complex that particular one is. But regardless, wherever you find yourself, then just essentially go on and do what you can. But most important thing will be don't feel lost. Know what it is and know how to respond. And then we then start looking at the production / go live strategy. Essentially, are we going to have a big bang, or are we going to have a scaled release? So big bang simply means, you know what, we are going to turn off all the system at once. We're going to do all our catch up and all our sort of our data migration and stuff, and we're going to release all the system all at once. Or a scaled release will probably be, you know what, we are going to do this, but at 12 o'clock, we are going to release the modules that control the sales, and we're going to see how that module works, maybe for the next 6 hours, making sure everything is okay. Then we are going to deploy the finance, and then we'll monitor the finance again for another 6 hours, and then now we're going to go ahead to deploy procurement and warehousing and HR, and once those are working again in the next 3 to 4 hours, we are then going to deploy the multi-vendor application and the postal management software. So these things will come into plan. Because of the technicalities involved in it, it will probably not be you as a BA who sort of, makes this plan. No, you would have like your functional analysts or your functional architects, or maybe some level of a very technical project manager who's had, very extreme experiences around deploying this kind of software, make those kind of, contributions and conversations. But it's, for you as someone who is still new and someone who is still getting into the business analysis field, you should not be lost when such conversations are happening. And you shouldn't feel like maybe you should have said something and you've ended up not saying anything. Okay, so by way of recount, again, we are looking to ensure that we have, before go live, that we have all our business continuity plans ready. Now, remember yesterday we defined business continuity plan as our fallback plan. It's usually, so in the deployment which we did yesterday, the business continuity plan was such that the organization reverted to paper. Right? So to admit a patient was done on paper, to transfer was done on paper, to discharge was done on paper. And once the system went live, they then went ahead to do a retrospective data catch-up. So manually having to enter all the admitted and discharged patients into the new system. So it's fairly similar what we're also going to do here. But depending on the kind of organization, there might be a little bit of tweak. So, for example, I've seen business continuity plans where we sort of, put things on hold, put another system to accept orders, for example. However, notify and display a message that your order is in queue and that your order will start, that will start to process your order from 2 p.m. Right? So we are not losing the business. We are not losing that customer base. We are apologizing to mention that we are upgrading our systems and that your transaction will be completed after 2 p.m. today. So that system takes the order, but it holds it in queue. And then when the new system goes live, the integration between the new system and that conduit system or temporary system will also go live, and the new system will then receive those transactions and then manage the transactions or process the transactions and send out the appropriate emails and so on and so forth. So there are several scenarios, which really I think is the most important thing, in your pursuit of business analysis, because you cannot, a person cannot essentially recount, how they've essentially, written user story, and 70% essentially of the responses being around Scrum activities. You perhaps would have seen over the course of yesterday and today that business analysis is actually ways beyond just writing user stories and walking through the Scrum. Now, having mentioned that, are those not important? Absolutely not. Those are very important. I'm just speaking to the possibility or the likeness in terms of strategically positioning one's self. Okay, so also ensuring that the business continuity plan is well understood by all the department. One thing that we normally do in this kind of go lives is that we carry out something called the dress rehearsal, right? So yesterday we spoke about controlled downtime, right? Which we did, I think, maybe 2 weeks before we went live. essentially just mimicking that go live. We agree with some departments and say, look, between 12 o'clock until 6 p.m., we are going to turn down your system. We're going to ask you to revert to business continuity plan. We are going to monitor how you participate with that business continuity plan. At 6 p.m., we're going to bring back the system again and we'll, retrospectively catch up that data and we'll see how things play out in that regard. Yeah. So in this case, we are referring to that same kind of exercise as a dress rehearsal. Okay. And within that dress rehearsal, it's essentially just mimicking that cutover, where we essentially go ahead to say, you know what, we are going to freeze the systems or we're going to take the systems offline at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Once we take it offline, all departments, please revert to business continuity plan. We're going to have it off for 4 hours. And then at 4 p.m., it's going to come back up again and we'll do a retrospective data catch up. And that will help us to identify whether there are any tacit knowledge areas that we may have missed. And perhaps based on what comes out of that, we can then, go ahead to see the lessons learned from that. The last deployment I did around May last year, this controlled downtime actually showed us something that we may have omitted. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have found out until that day that some of the very important data belonging to patients were being displayed, and the nurses had to use like sticky paper to put on the television. But we wouldn't have found that out if we didn't do that retrospective. We didn't do that, planned downtime session or period. Okay, so we took that knowledge, we took it as lessons learned, we iterate it and we adopt it and we learn it and we ensure that it's all covered for the day that we're going to do the real thing. Okay, and then based off of that, we can now say that the system goes live, or perhaps once the cutover period is over, the data migration is completed, and then they are ready to sort of go ahead to deploy that new system. They deploy the new system, and then what happens? The retrospective data catch up will start happening, and then for the next 2 to 3 weeks or the next 30 days, the next 35 days, depending on the arrangement, the team will provide what they call a hypercare activities, which essentially is just providing support. Like we're not just leaving you on your own. If you have any questions around the way things are now working or around this new system, you will always have someone from IT to ask the question, someone from business to actually lead you and answer those your questions. If you have a challenge, there will always be someone. So that hypercare tends to last for approximately, well, the last one I did was around 21 days. I've seen 14 days, I've seen 30 days. It really, really depends on the organization. Okay. And so I would like to thank you once again, for being so patient and listening to me once again. So this is a 2-day, training. So today will be the final. And I would like to just leave a few remarks with you before, we call it an evening. And these are my remarks to you. Now, I understand that if you're here today and you're seeking for uh, you're seeking for a career in business analysis, there's always a big misconception, or perhaps I wouldn't call it a misconception. There is a conception that everyone has transferable skills which can be transferred to business analysis. And again, this is only my opinion. I totally, totally disagree with that. Now, when you compare what we did yesterday and what we have done today, you can see these are 3 different projects. But amongst these 3 different projects, you can see similarities. So a person who has worked in any 3 of these projects could essentially work in any other kind of project. So if you've worked on the MVA project, you can also work in the NHS one. If you've worked in the NHS one, you can also work in the ERP one. So those are what I refer to as transferable skills. I don't think that if you work in a place where you say hello to someone, you have a chat, you deal with difficult customers or customers who come in shouting at you. That is not a true reflection of what business analysis is all about. The transferable skills that will make sense, help you to, secure that role would essentially then be maybe if you've worked as a project manager or you've worked, within the IT environment, maybe as a PM, maybe as some maybe a system analyst or something within those range, or perhaps you've gotten yourself in a situation where you've done at least one deployment following a framework which is essentially accepted, universally accepted and used across several organizations. The kind of knowledge that you would essentially gain from such deployments is what I consider, in my own opinion, to be transferable skills. Now, the second thing which I would equally advise, if you can, is to seek to acquire at least one domain knowledge. So a domain could be healthcare, it could be retail, it could be banking, it could be civil service, and so on and so forth. Now, essentially doing a deployment or even any kind of digitization project with any of those kind of organizations will give you 100% a relevant set of transferable skills. So, it's absolutely very easy for anyone to go to YouTube and even train to become a business analyst, listen to videos on YouTube to become a business analyst, buy maybe like a $50 website and, write user stories for the website and then say, well, I'm going to build the website and stuff. But, the question really would be, if you do your own personal gap analysis and you look at what organizations are seeking for, is this really what they are seeking for? The ability to write those user stories, the ability to sort of listen to a couple of videos and all of that, whilst those are essentially very important and very helpful, if this is a career that you are really, really, really interested in pursuing, then my recommendation would be to seek to take at least one more step. And may God help you as you take that one more step. And I also wanted to mention around understanding at least one deployment methodology. So either one or two or three of these essentially will be of tremendous help to you. Yesterday, we used or leveraged a deployment methodology, which is used. I've used that deployment methodology in more than 3 places, 3, NHS trust places. So it's tested, it's trusted. And you can see the similarities between that deployment methodology and what we even did with the ERP deployment within the retail. So there are similarities. Of course, there are equally some discrepancies in terms of the fact that we did a full deployment within the NHS without writing a single user story. But, who says that that's not transferable? We've just deployed the full ERP, without writing a single user story. Everything was, we contained everything within a blueprint document, and we did a configuration, we tested it, and it went live. But then, what about the aspect of where you have to run discoveries and for what you have to develop, like user stories and stuff, and run through the agile method? So that also is a very, very important set of knowledge for you to have. Right? And then I just wanted to mention the last one as well, that business analysis isn't necessarily Scrum. So there is, your focus should be to become a business analyst and not necessarily, the understanding of everything, within Scrum. So those are important, but those should make up like 15 to 20% of the knowledge that you have. Now, I've worn the hat, not just worn the hat, I have worked as a business change manager. Part of my responsibilities as a business change manager was also to interview people and to onboard people, right? And I interviewed lots of people, lots and lots of people. And there's always one criteria that makes it very easy to identify people who aren't really that experienced, because it's always, there's that question which, you will always get in every business analysis interview. And it always says, talk me through what you've done in your past role or in your last business analysis role. And, there's a narration typical that it's not from one person, not from 2 people, and so on and so forth. It normally starts with, doing as is to be gap analysis, doing workshop, and then for the remainder, 70% of the next, of the time that they're going to spend is now going to be about telling me about how They went through the sprint planning sessions about how they raise bought and tickets, the daily stand-ups, and recounting the entire Scrum activities, the entire Scrum ceremonies as well. So those are very important, but those are not necessarily the roles of a business analyst. So between yesterday and today, you would have seen business analysis in action, being able to intellectually elicit feedbacks or requirements from stakeholders, being able to actually manage the requirements or the gaps which you've identified. The fact that you will now learn and master how to carry out impact assessment, or the fact that you are now in a position where you would leverage a variety of skills, including cost benefit analysis, other forms of risk assessment, to be able to reach a conclusion or perhaps an option, which you then articulate and present to a set of key stakeholders and elicit an approval for them and follow up with that approval to see that it's configured. These are all different business analysis activities. You now know that there is such a thing about creating awareness when you're looking to deploy a system. You have a very big role to play in that. You also now know that there are such a thing, such as, that there are such things such as a standard operating procedure, which is really, really very important, because if you're leading that change, you ought to have or play a role in the development of those SOPs to support the new service. We're now talking about business continuity plan. You also have a big role to play in this as a business analyst. So all of these things and more, to sort of come together to define who you really are or who you really should be as a business analyst. And you guess what? It's not tough. It's just that the knowledge seems to be there, but it's also scarce. You just need to acquire it. It's not really tough to acquire. And, in that position, God willing, you should be able to make success. And on that note, I would once again want to say a very, very huge thank you to you. As we close, once again, I'm just going to very briefly recount the offers that we have. If you have undergone business analysis training and you've come to the place where you can even recount, as I've said, like you can tell me about what you did in your last role, and you can recount about writing user stories and going through the Scrum activities and all of those things. You've put in some work. You've even maybe started applying, but you've not been able to land a role, or perhaps you are currently working as a BA, but you've only had maybe like 1 year or less, and you're looking to get into the contract market. With this 30 days program, or this 30 days program, of course, which can also be delivered in 4 hours, depending on time availability, we can actually go deep dive on a master's level, running through 2 of those projects which we've run through in extremely detailed manner that sort of brings everything right on the bear and puts practicality into each of it from start to finish. Now, typically the people who run this, the people who don't have that time, who can say, you know what, I can take maybe like 2, 3 days off work, close to weekend, or maybe 2 days off work, and then we can add the weekend, and we can do this on a 4-day powerful, delivery. And then from the next Monday, the application start, most often in the next 2 weeks, with the help of the newly revamped CV and everything, interviews start happening. You cannot learn everything even in 2 years, but you need to get in somewhere and then start growing from there. So that's the overall strategy. So there is a 30 days master's program targeted towards people who have some level of experience. And we want to take that level of experience and then make practicality out of it based on my 11 years experience. And then, that helps you to get in somewhere. Then there's equally a 6 to 8 week program targeted towards people who may have, done a boot camp or some training and maybe, not get much out of it, or not really feeling very confident, or perhaps, for some reason they didn't think that it wasn't right for them. Sometimes you go through it and you really know that there's nothing you've learned from it that can actually take you on those. But you probably know what business analysis is now. You probably know what as is to be is. You probably know what process modeling is, even though you may not be doing it right. For the next 6 to 8 weeks, we can actually brush you up significantly to get you out there to start planning. The strategy is very simple. we teach you at least one deployment strategy, one deployment process from start to finish. And with that deployment strategy from start to finish, you can actually start applying for a job. And whilst you may not qualify for some jobs, there are going to be guaranteed several jobs out there that will be within the purview of your knowledge. And that's the strategy. Then following that will be the 12-week program. Essentially, the 12-week program is targeted towards people who just want to start from scratch, or who don't at the moment have that extent of that knowledge in business analysis. And the strategy, once again, is equally the same. We want to take you and articulate and train you properly within one deployment using either an NHS deployment or perhaps a retail deployment. And we're going to show you and take you practically, working on this as an internship for that 3 months. So the contract in itself is a work contract. You get all the tools that you would normally get if you're working in a real place of work. So you don't have to use any free tools. All the Microsoft services or Microsoft 365 and Visio will be provided to you, official emails and all of that. And the contract as well, like I mentioned, is a work contract. So we're able to offer you references at the end of those. And we take you through that entire 12 weeks, following the same strategy. You go through one deployment, understanding all activities, not only understanding, but actually doing all activities from analysis until go live, including documenting those BCP documents as well as those SOP documents. Right. And we also have a 4 and 6 month, by domain internship, which are, sort of designed to take people to a master's level in this regard. So this is going to be my final slide. And I would essentially, thank you immensely once again for being so patient to listen to me. I will now stand by in case there's anyone who has any question. I'll be more than happy to take your questions. So, hi, Jane, please go on. Oh, Lara, sorry. My sight is not very good.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, my name is Lara. Thank you for the session. Even though I missed part of it, well, at least what I've seen is still I can still go ahead with it. So I just want to ask, is it possible for you to send us a recording of this?
Yes. Would you please just drop me a message or an email? So let me drop my email and my number, and then I will reply with an email.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Then my second question is, when you said that after the training, what are we going to do? Like, what are the types of job roles that we are going to be applying for? Because I know business analyst is what we get when we go for the trainings. You have business analyst training, but when you get to the job site roles, you now see different types of different business analysis, as in business analyst jobs that you can apply for. You look at it that these are what you can do, but sometimes most of them don't come true. Like what I mean don't come true, when you make the applications,
Mhm.
like most of them don't come true, like maybe positively for you to get that positive response. But you know that this is what you
Mhm.
can do. And there's sometimes there are some again that you see like technical business analyst. There are some again that you see like data business analyst and all those things.
Mhm.
So it's kind of confusing, and it's you see process business analyst again, all those things. Like I know you did the one for the process and also for the retail and all, but it's kind of confusing. So even if we go for the masterclass and all, are we going to have that guidance on okay, what type of job roles that we need to apply for and all?
Yes, I can actually just answer that question now. And I am not a party. So I'm one of those people who do not agree that people who are still starting out should just, spread their arms so wide. You want to be a data business analyst, you want to be an IT business analyst, you want to be a technical business analyst, you want to be Dynamics, Salesforce. So all those things are plenty. At some point, you will be able to define what you want to be. If you go to the job search site or the job site, you will find business analysts, you'll find business systems analyst, you will have business process analyst, you have business change analysts. Any of these four, which you come are, very, very, very much related, you can do the job of any of those four. Now, or else you have data skills, forget about data business analyst. Okay, if you have the data skills, that's an added advantage. But
Yeah.
if you have not mastered business analysis and now you're also looking to get into the data side of things, well, it may work for you, it may not work for you. I think it boils down to your personality.
Okay,
Okay.
but most of the
Now,
roles, sorry,
mhm,
I'm sorry, but most of the roles don't have the plain business. It's always like you have to have this added advantage. Like you need to have like an SQL knowledge. You have to have like a data
no,
knowledge and all. Most of the
no.
BA roles are mostly on the job sites.
No, there are several BA roles, several, tons of them. I was actually going through, some of them this evening. Because sometimes people graduating from here, I sort of, do help them to search for jobs and stuff. And which site do you normally use?
So I use total jobs. Then I use job sites.
Hmm.
Then sometimes I use Indeed. Job serve, sorry,
Yeah,
job serve.
JobServe. Yeah, so JobServe is heavily contractors. I use that as well. Um, if you're starting out, it may not be the best place for you because the people there are, it's a specialized market, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Indeed will be fair because you will definitely find business analyst jobs in Indeed, but you will also see lots of those, data BA roles in Indeed. Glassdoor is the most excellent place to use now. So, and I'm going to give you this information for free. So, three of the people who landed roles last year that I know towards the end of last year were all through Glassdoors. I've got like two people interviewing now, and those jobs came through Glassdoor. So that's equally one place to bear in mind. CV Library is equally another very nice place. Read is equally another very nice place. So total jobs is good, but remember there's usually quite a lot of contracts as well in total jobs and CW jobs. So you might find mixed um, thingy around those. Having
Okay.
said that, I would also like to acknowledge that what you're saying is fact. You're going to find those BA jobs, specialized BA jobs that are wanting BAs who have specific skills, right? So it could be for Dynamics, it could be for Workday, and even me myself that I'm teaching, I don't know all of those things. I've never had nothing to do with Workday. I probably don't have, some of their core banking system or core insurance system. I don't have those. So you cannot know everything. You just need to find those ones that are related to you and pursue those ones. That's the strategy. If you spread your ants too wide, you might actually end up not catching any.
Okay, then I have another question again. Okay, sorry, like you said, after the training, like if you go for any one of those options that you have mentioned now, I would have
Mhm.
that because I know most of the trainings that I've gone for like 2 or 3 now. So, but the support is not always there when it's time for interviews, when it's time for CVs and jobs
Mhm.
applications. Do you understand?
Mhm.
So I just want to
Mhm.
know what kind of support will you be offering after
So
maybe
very. Mhm.
what kind of support will you be offering when after the class?
Yes. So, very specifically, these are the services. Number one will be that any program that you're doing before the end of that program, your CV will be ready. Okay. If you land a job interview, you get two as a standard. So, this is the contract, this is the agreement, two
Okay.
interview preparations.
Okay.
Meaning that if you're going for an interview tomorrow, I wish I could actually share my WhatsApp status. I've got some of those which I have on my phone right now, which I did yesterday, which I did some of it today, which I'm also going to do some of that tomorrow. So essentially, if you have a job interview coming up, I would request to have a copy of your JD. And once I have the copy of your JD, I will preempt the questions and will schedule a meeting. And with the meeting which we've scheduled, we will then try to preempt the questions that will be asked. I'll prepare you for that interview. Even if it's a two-phased or two-stage interview, I'll prepare you for all the stages. And that offer is limited to two of your first interviews. Now, you should also know that I don't accept more than 7 people per class. So, and the class is typically equivalent to 1 month, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So, I accept only the number of people that I can cater for per time. Okay,
Okay.
so that's it. Now, in terms of, let me just summarize that is one is your CV. We will do that for you. Your LinkedIn profile as well, which is going to be a reflection of your CV, we will also do. And the preparation for your interview, we will also do. And that's guaranteed.
Okay. What about for job applications? Because I know
We,
I heard there's
mhm.
somewhere like an automated job applications for jobs.
No, no, don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't do that because, and this is again, I'm just gonna, regardless of whether you come back or not, I'm gonna give you this information for free as a gesture of goodwill. The best way to apply and get results would be, let's say, for example, you end up at Glassdoor and you find an application which you need to make. Now, you read the job description and it matches what you know you can do, it matches what you feel you can do, or you believe you can attempt that particular job.
Mhm.
You need to then tweak your CV to align with that JD. So this is part of what we teach in terms of regardless of which of the programs that you go on with. So you have to amend your CV or tweak your CV to align with those. When it aligns, generally there is usually a very, 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 high chance that you will get the first call. And this is expo. Or else a time comes when everybody learns how to do it, and then that one will also cast. But as of now, it's not casted. So at the point, but just make sure that it's something that you essentially can attempt, right? And then when that happens, then you have that good luck. So I wouldn't do any automation. It doesn't make sense because if your standard CV will not align with every job.
Okay. All right then.
You're
That's fine.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then what's the
All
modality
right.
of making the payments also? Maybe I don't know because I don't think you made the payment options there. It's not showing from what it showed us. Is it until we reach out
Yeah.
to you
So
that you let us know about that?
no, 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 I can mention it here as well, but my phone number, just send me a message on WhatsApp as well regarding the recording.
Okay.
But the payments, depending on which one you want to go for, can be made in installments, right? So if you wanted to do like the 4 day, power packed one, then, that can be an installment. But if you're doing the 30 days, that can be in two installments. If you're doing 6 to 8 weeks, that can be in three installments. If you're doing 12 weeks, that can be in three installments. If you're doing 4 months, that can be in four installments. If you're doing 6 months, that can be in six installments.
Okay. All right then. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. No problems. Hi, Babatunde. Sorry, I see you've raised your hand. Please go on.
Yes, Sochi, good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I already sent my questions in the chat room, but I'll just
Mm-hmm,
read them to you. While you were taking us in the class, I was
mm-hmm,
trying to confirm if the new ERP, that is the Dash, and the
mm-hmm.
electronic payment system would have a handshake. And you mentioned that there are going to be different BAs for each of those processes. So I wanted to know if
That's
they
right.
will have a handshake and if there will be a third BA to handle the handshake, or is one of those two that would handle it. That's one. I have about three
Mm-hmm.
cases, so just oblige me. So the
Okay.
second one is the BBP. I'm not sure I remember what that stands for now. Business something plan.
Blueprint, business blueprint.
Yes, the business blueprint. I was asking, is it the same as a charter document for projects? And then the last
No.
question is a combination of, I think you might have answered it, but what I was trying to find out is when we subscribe to any of these classes, especially the 12 weeks or the 4 months one, would we
Mm-hmm.
be able to learn tools like Jira, SQL, Tableau, and other tools that are useful to a BA? And will the 12 from the 12 weeks downwards, will
Mm-hmm.
it equip us to be ready to jump in and move on as a new BA? And I'm asking because I I'm a new Scrum Master, and along
Mm-hmm.
the line I'm losing interest in that, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing and reading about BA for a long time. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's been some interest, and coincidentally attending your class has already also, increased that interest. So I'm trying to weigh my option before a total crossover, even though I see a lot of similarities. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me just, obviously, we'll have to walk through the questions one at a time, just in case I missed some along the way. So you were asking about those systems, the PMS, the MVA, and the ERP, whether there was going to be like a handshake across those systems. Was that your first question? Like whether there was going to be integration across the three systems?
Yeah, correct.
Good. Yes. So there will be integrations across the three systems, and the use case will be such that item transactions that happen within the multi-vendor application will trigger an API call to the ERP. And the purpose of that API call will be essentially that it should adjust the inventory for that particular item which has been sold, because the ERP is going to hold the master data for item inventory. That particular transaction as well is also going to trigger an API call to the postal management software. And the message is going to be very simple. You need to raise a postal, label, and you need to send that postal label to the guys at the warehouse, so that the guys at the warehouse can print the label, attach it to the item, and then send it out. So to that extent, yes, there's going to be, that shaking of hands. You also asked whether part of this training is going to include SQL and Tableau and stuff, and unfortunately, no. So this is a strict business analysis. Now, I do not dispute the fact that having an understanding on, these things, the SQL, like SQL, Tableau and stuff around, for data management is important and relevant for, BAs in today's world. But the services that I offer are, strictly for business analysts. So essentially, most people along the way would, want to go ahead and, gain some more of those experience, which I think is really a nice thing. But we couldn't fit all of those in the 12-week period for working adults, and realistically hope to come out with something tangible. So it's not something that we do at this moment. The third question, I'm just trying to recall that third question. If you can please remind me.
Before I remind you of the third question, what of Jira? If there's no SQL, would there be explanations around
yes.
Jira?
Oh, yes. So,
okay, great.
Yes, you will be using Jira. You will also be creating something known as a business requirement document. So, you see, old school business analysis is not really old school. Yeah. So, typically managing your requirement delves into requirement traceability matrix. It's a skill that you should know. Being able to manage your business requirements and all the children, children meaning like the functional requirements that come out of it, the business rules that come out of it, the use cases that come out of it, in a way that numbers it. You see, that's the problem, part of the problem that Jira solves. Because when you create your epic, which is the equivalence of a business requirement, you then have your user stories, but each user story is assigned to an epic. So you then see that essentially, that visibility, that traceability is not a problem. Every user story can be traced to the to the epic. So you will be getting training not only on Jira, but also around the old school Excel management of requirement by virtue of creating a BRD.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you've answered the last question, which is around, I see some similarities between Scrum and BA, and I wanted to know that after, specifically from the 12 weeks classes, one would be market ready in terms of, getting a job and just moving on.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely, not a problem.
You didn't reiterate the cost. Can you help to just mention the cost for each of these plans again? Thank you.
Yes. So the 3 months one, that's the 12 weeks one, is £837, and that works out as 279 per month. Whereas the 30 days program works out as at £329. The 6 to 8 weeks one works out £550. And that those can also be paid in installments. You're welcome. Okay, so Victor, sorry, you had your hands up. Please go on.
Hello, Sochi. Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Victor.
Yeah, thank you once again. My question is about the first question will be around additional certifications that you need to get your BA journey started. Even as a BA, I've been a BA for 2 years, going to 3 years. So, what certification do I need to boost my chances in the job market? Just like Lara said, I know the job market is tough at the moment, and there are specifications and the job description and all that. So, what other additional certifications do I need as a BA to further strengthen my chances out there? And that's the first one. And the second one would be the fact that I have an interview coming up on Friday because I'm planning to switch jobs. And I noticed that because where I work right now, most of the project we're doing is about optimization, optimizing the website, a mobile app, and all that. So I realized that the retail one, which I joined 30 minutes late, and the NHS one, most importantly, are not something that is being taught. In most trainings I've attended, I've not really attended the law, but I noticed that this very particular NHS one and the retail one is not something that is being taught in most of those trainings. And I want to say that if I subscribe for the 30 days one, and what is this something I can grasp in 4 days, like you said, just to learn more about what happens in the NHS, because I'm more particular about the NHS one. What happens in the NHS one. Yeah, that's the second question. Then the last question is what you already know. So I'll send you a message regarding that one.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And I would say congratulations as well. You've started out with that journey, and it can only get better from now. Now, judging from the fact that you are, you already have close or even over 2 years experience as a BA, for you to soar, I don't know what qualifications, like what BA qualifications you have, but if possible within the next year or so to try to get to the CBAP level, maybe at your 3rd year, or, I don't know how many hours, but ideally you should practice for 7,900 hours minimum to be eligible for the CBAP. At the moment, if you haven't achieved that and you're able to pursue like the practitioner certification, the IIBA, I think it's called ECBA. It's not the entry level, it's the CCB or something. I'll find out which one, but it's the practitioner level. There are 3 layers. One is foundational or entry level. The second one is practitioner. And the third one is CBAP, which is the highest. Now, that would essentially boost your career, or that would boost your, perception. Now, over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, again, if you decide, or if you sort of start trying to build an awareness, or perhaps build your career in any one of the ERP sites, maybe like Dynamics 365 or SAP. If you do that, you can, realistically hope that maybe like in under 1 year or so, you should be able to get into the contract market. It pays really, really, really well. And around that 3 to 4 year mark as well, you should equally be able to get your CBAP within that period. So this is a long-term plan, if you ask me. For now, at the short term, seek to have your practitioner level certification, either with BCS or IIBA. At the long run, start considering your IIBA, as well as start considering leveraging, expanding, let's put it that way. So instead of just being an ordinary BA, start expanding towards understanding, business analysis, Dynamics 365 business analysis. So that's ERP implementation, or do the same as well with SAP, whichever one you find to be much better. Something else that would actually help your reasoning and your knowledge to, sort of expand over the course of the next 1 to 2 years as well will be if you're able to sort of get a grasp into Prince2, right? So essentially understanding how the people, the project managers who manage you, how, what goes on behind their mind as they're planning those projects, sort of trying to clear out some of these confusions that people tend to have around, the phases of project management and how it aligns with the activities as a business analyst, and so on and so forth. So I think those would equally be of, great deal. So maybe after your 4th to your 5th year, you can then start looking at enterprise architecture, which is really, the place where it then takes you into the higher, higher night, if that makes sense, So there's both a short-term plan as well as a long-term plan. You already have a job, so, just consider this and see which one works out best for you. In the meantime, if you don't have any certification, try and pursue the ECBA, the practitioner level, practitioner, I think that's what it's called, IIBA practitioner for business analyst. And I will send you the specific link for that one. Try and get it. And over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, then, try and get the CBAP, because the CBAP now guarantees that you're a senior business analyst. That's what it means. That's the highest level you will achieve as a BA. So I don't know if that answers that question, Victor.
It does. What about the other sub question will be, are they renewable?
Sorry?
Renewable, not the Prince2 renewable after 3 years. Once you just mentioned, are they renewable?
Sorry, I think your voice is very far. I'm struggling to hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. Are they renewable? I mean, I know the Prince2 is renewable after 3 years. The CBAP,
yes, they're all renewable, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. All right, thank you anyway. Yeah.
No problems. And best of luck with your interview, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Ivy, you were asking about the fee structure. So I've mentioned, so for the 30 days you can pay into installments, and for all other ones you can pay in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 installments. So either ways, installments are very much good, very much acceptable. Okay. Awesome. So thank you so much, everyone. The start dates, Ivy, we can enroll you anytime you want to start. It's highly flexible. So I only get to manage 7 people per time. So it's quite flexible. We can get you started anytime you'd like to start. Awesome. That case, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very, very much. And we'll be in touch. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors. Feel free to get in touch with me anytime for any reason. I'll be more than happy to assist in every way that I can, as well as play my role in getting you to that destination. Thank you so much, everyone, and God bless. Thank you, Lara. You have a very pleasant
Thank you. I'll be in
evening.
touch 100%. I'll
No
be in
worries.
touch 100%. Yeah.
No problems at all, my friend. Awesome night. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye now.
Bye.